Hey guys, welcome to How to Make a Living in Music, where I give you some insight into the indie artist side of the music industry. Today we're going to talk about 5 things you need to know before you start your music career. Let's get into it. The first thing you need to know before you start your music career is, what is your why? Why do you even play music? When you know why you're playing music, you'll have a better idea of how far you'll go, what's negotiable, what's not negotiable. Let's say you're just writing music because you feel compelled to express yourself, but you don't really want to get into trying to sell your music or thinking of it as a commodity or trying to establish a brand. You just want to play music. That's fine, and that's great. And knowing that will really help you to understand how seriously you want to take your music as a career. Because when you are trying to pursue music as a career, you really do need to think about it in a different way. For example, I had a really good buddy who is an absolute prolific writer, writes a ton of music. And he saw all of his friends playing shows. He went out and played shows and was a great performer as well. But as soon as he started trying to record his album and going in with a producer, it all went sideways, and he realized he didn't want anyone else to have any say in his music. He didn't want anyone else shaping it. He didn't really even want to play live. He realized through that process, after having spent thousands of dollars, that the music was really just for him. And he doesn't play music out anymore because he realized it was his thing. It was private, it was an emotional outlet, it was experiential for him, and other people appreciated it, and he'll still play here or there for people, but he doesn't try to pursue it as a music career, and there's nothing wrong with that. For him, that's a higher form of accuracy for what he wants to do with his music. And he probably could have saved a couple $1,000s if he had understood that before he set out. So understanding why is very important. Understanding the reasons that you play music is very important, because not everyone is an entrepreneur. And if you're going to set out into the music industry, you really have to view it that way. Regardless of whether you stay independent or if you go into the industry side of things, they're going to want you to prove yourself before they'll pick you up, unless everything lines up. And that's like winning the lottery twice. The second thing you need to know before you start: how do you define success? It's really important that you reverse engineer your career. And what do I mean by that? For example, ambition and contentment are 2 very different forces, and maintaining a balance between those is very difficult. For me, when I started out, I knew that I wanted to pursue music, and I was completely sold out to the idea. It's absolutely what I wanted to do. But I didn't want to turn around and look back on my life later on, realizing I had sold out my family. I had sold out all my friends. I had walked away from relationships and the good things in life because I was so determined to make it as an artist. So I needed to ask myself some very serious questions about contentment versus ambition. How far would I go, and how comfortable would I be? If I wasn't pursuing music, would I be content? No. I had to pursue it. If I pursued it too far, would I be content? No. So for me, that was a very poignant question to ask. Because at the end of your career, when you know what success looks like, you can start taking the steps backwards to know how to launch there. When you have a good idea of the income that you need to make over the course of a year, for example, you can break that down into monthly, divide that by 12. Okay, so let's say it's $50,000. And you break that down, divide that by 12, all of a sudden that number becomes a whole lot smaller, and you realize you just need to make this amount per month, that becomes a much smaller enemy to defeat. So knowing how much you need to make is important, but also knowing how little you can need is very, very important. And people often don't think about it that way. We tend to think about how much money can I make? Well, knowing how much money, how little you can need also helps you to make those leaps into pursuing music a lot easier. And that becomes a much more attainable goal. All right, number 3. What are you willing to give? When you think about what your audience wants from you, what your audience needs from you, you're going to be making content, whether that's albums, whether that's singles, whether that's art projects. This actually applies across the broad spectrum of art, not just music. But music is very important because so much of music and the music industry is changing rapidly from month to month, not even year to year anymore. So you have to be willing to connect with your audience, get to know them, understand what it is that they want and need from you, and give them that thing. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, all of that. It's all algorithm driven. So they're giving you what you've said you want to hear, right? So when you're an audience, or when you're the artist thinking about your audience, you're trying to think, you need to approach it, I should say, as what has my audience said they want to hear from me? Keep doing that thing. Keep giving them that content. And when you give to your audience, this is very, very important. When you give to your audience, they will give back to you. I think so much of the problem with musicians and the independent music industry is that we tend to self-obsess, and we think about what we want to say or what we want to do, and we hope our audience comes along with us. Well, when you change your perspective, when you flip that and you start thinking about it as growing a supportive community, you're creating this ecosystem where it's symbiotic. You're giving to your audience what they have said they really want from you, and then they are giving back to you and sustaining you as an artist. And things like Patreon and patron subscription services, and artists that crowdsource on a continual, regular basis do this really well because they have to. And it creates a music career where it is self-sustaining and you can make a decent living doing the thing you love. There's a really good chance you'll never be Taylor Swift. You are never going to be Taylor Swift anyways. If you want to go into the industry thing, they're going to require a lot of sacrifices from you. Sacrifices of decision, sacrifices of direction, and that might be fine too. For many artists, that's not fine, and they want to create what they want to create. They want to create what their artists or what their audience, wants from them, and they want that symbiotic relationship, and that's possible now, and it hasn't been possible for much of the music industry. Fourth thing that you need to know before you start: how far are you willing to go? For me, it's difficult because I've never done music. I've never been involved in the music industry where I didn't have a high cost. And what I mean by that is I've always had kids and a wife. And so anytime I'm spending away from them costs me something. It costs that relationship. It costs that time that I could be spending with my family. And for me, that's a pretty expensive cost. For me, money has always been a part of it. I'm not trying to be a hobby musician. I'm trying to make a living at it. And so That's something I've had to consider very deeply. Now, when you understand that there is a cost, you can start thinking about music as a budgetary process. It's not just the money you need to make from playing music, but it's the time and the effort and the energy that you have to spend being away from the rest of your life pursuing your music. That becomes very paradigm shifting, and that can be really, really good. So it helps you to understand what you won't do. When you understand the cost of going and playing a show, maybe you won't do free shows anymore that are just for publicity, or the exposure has to be proven and very specific, like playing a large festival where, okay, they're not going to pay you very much. You may get to sell some merch, but you're going to be playing in front of thousands of people. So go there with a plan. So it helps you to know what you won't do. It also helps you to know what would you be willing to do to have a shot at making the life and the career you want. You can start looking at that from both sides when you are thinking deeply about what you are willing to do and how far you are willing to go. So the fifth thing that you need to understand before you start your music career is it does not matter how talented or creative you are. You will see people who are less talented than you be much more successful. And you will see people who are more talented than you be less successful. We have this romantic notion that talent will win out, and that's just not true. You see, so much of the music industry is about building teams. And if you find that you are a person that is highly creative and you love to spend time just writing music and you don't want to be bothered with the business side of things or the entrepreneurial things, you need to get people on your team who are business minded, who do make those decisions, and they give you the space to do what you're really good at. It requires both the left and the right brain, the creative side and the more analytical side. And some people are really balanced and they maintain both of those well. And they can pursue music and be their own business themselves. And that's great. Some people can't, and they aren't balanced between the left and the right brain. And that's fine too. They just need to be strategic about it and build that team around them that does those things. And that will give you the greatest chance at being successful. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Next Tuesday, I'll have another edition of How to Make a Living in Music. Thank you for following along. I appreciate you very much. If you have any questions or any subjects that you would like me to discuss, leave them in the comments below. And of course, if you haven't yet, click the subscribe button and ring the bell next to it. That way you'll get notified every time I put out a new video. All right, guys, thank you.